Welcome to Mr. Beebop.
The Murder at the Vicarage is a work of detective fiction by British writer Agatha Christie, first published in the UK by the Collins Crime Club in October 1930, and in the US by Dodd, Mead and Company, later in the same year. It is the first novel to feature the character of Miss Marple and her village of St Mary Mead. Here are some interesting facts and trivia about the novel. The dedication of the book reads, "To Rosalind." The subject of this dedication is Christie's daughter, Rosalind Hicks, who was the daughter of her first marriage to Archibald Christie, and Agatha Christie's only child. Rosalind was 11 years of age at the time of the publication of the book. In the peaceful village of St Mary Mead nothing ever happens, so it seems almost incredible when Colonel Prothero, the churchwarden, is discovered, shot through the head, in the vicarage study. Colonel Prothero is not a popular man. He is so unpopular that even the vicar comments that should he be killed, it would be a service to mankind. And when just such a murder takes place, and in the vicar's study no less, everybody thinks they know who has done it, including Miss Marple, the real old maid of the village who knows everything, and sees everything, and hears everything. She declares that at least 7 people have reasons for wishing Colonel Prothero out of the way. Excitement dies down when somebody confesses to having committed the crime. But that is not the end, for almost immediately, somebody quite different also confesses. And there is a third confession, through the telephone. But who really killed Colonel Prothero? The elderly sleuth has her work cut out for her. In this novel, not only are we formally introduced to the character of Miss Jane Marple, a spinster living next to the vicar in St Mary Mead, who knows human behavior and is recognized in her village as astute and generally correct, but we also meet several other recurring characters including the vicar and his wife, Leonard and Griselda Clement, who also appeared in The Body in the Library in 1942, and 450 from Paddington in 1957. Raymond West, Miss Marple's nephew, a writer who normally lives in London. Miss Marple's friends, Mrs. Martha Price Ridley, widow and gossip who lives next to the vicarage at the end of the road, and Miss Amanda Hartnell and Miss Caroline Weatherby, spinsters in St Mary Mead, who live next to each other. The Times Literary Supplement of November 6, 1930, posed the various questions as to who could have killed Prothero and why, and concluded, as a detective story, the only fault of this one is that it is hard to believe the culprit could kill Prothero so quickly and quietly. The 3 plans of the room, garden, and village show that almost within sight and hearing was Miss Marple, who always knew every single thing that happened and drew the worst inferences. And 3 of Miss Marple's spinster friends, otherwise known as parish cats, were in the next 3 houses. It is Miss Marple who does detect the murderer in the end, but one suspects she would have done it sooner in reality. The review of the novel in the New York Times Book Review of November 30, 1930 begins, "The talented Miss Christie is far from being at her best in her latest mystery story. It will add little to her eminence in the field of detective fiction." The review went on to say that the local sisterhood of spinsters is introduced with much gossip and click-clack. A bit of this goes a long way, and the average reader is apt to grow weary of it all, particularly of the amiable Miss Marple, who is sleuth-in-chief of the affair. The reviewer summarized the setup of the plot and concluded, "The solution is a distinct anticlimax." H. C. O'Neill in The Observer of December 12, 1930 said that, Here is a straightforward story which very pleasantly draws a number of red herrings across the docile reader's path. There is a distinct originality in her new expedient for keeping the secret. She discloses it at the outset, turns it inside out, apparently proves that the solution cannot be true, and so produces an atmosphere of bewilderment. In the Daily Express of October 16, 1930, Harold Nicholson said, "I have read better works by Agatha Christie, but that does not mean that this last book is not more cheerful, more amusing, and more seductive than the generality of detective novels." In a short review, dated October 15, 1930, the Daily Mirror Review declared, "Bafflement is well sustained." Robert Barnard wrote 60 years later that this is our first glimpse of St Mary Mead, a hotbed of burglary, impersonation, adultery, and ultimately murder. What is it precisely that people find so cozy about such stories? He found the resolution a bit hard to believe, yet the story is more appealing to readers of 1990 than to those in 1930. The solution boggles the mind somewhat, but there are too many incidental pleasures to complain, and the strong dose of vinegar in this first sketch of Miss Marple is more to modern taste than the touch of syrup in later presentations. Christie herself later wrote, "Reading Murder at the Vicarage now, I am not so pleased with it as I was at the time. It has, I think, far too many characters and too many subplots. But at any rate the main plot is sound." The story was adapted into a play by Moi Charles and Barbara Toy in 1949. It was first performed at the New Theatre in Northampton on October 17, 1949, prior to moving to the Playhouse Theatre in the West End, where it opened on December 16, 1949. The play was the first time that the character of Miss Marple had been depicted outside the original books, and she was portrayed by Barbara Mullen. The director was Reginald Tate, who also played the part of Lawrence Redding. The play enjoyed a run of 126 performances, closing on April 1, 1950. Barbara Mullen reprised her role as Miss Marple when the play, directed by Donald Bodley, premiered at the Savoy Theatre on July 27, 1975. A year later, the play transferred to the Fortune Theatre. By then the role of Miss Marple was played by actress Avril Angers. From June 6, 1977, Miss Marple was played by Muriel Pavlo, and from 1978 to 1979 by Gabrielle Hamilton. In 1982, the play was performed at the Theatre Royal in Windsor, between July 13 and August 7. The play was directed by Hugh Goldie, and starred Mary Carriage as Miss Marple. The BBC adapted the book into a film, which was first broadcast on December 25, 1986, with Joan Hickson as Miss Marple, Paul Eddington as the Vicar, and Polly Adams as Anne Prothero. The adaptation was generally very close to the original novel. It was presented again in the ITV series Agatha Christie's Marple by Granada Television in 2004, with Geraldine McEwen as Miss Marple, Tim McInerney as the Vicar, Derek Jacobi as Colonel Prothero, and Janet McTeer as Anne. This version eliminates some characters, changes the names of others, and the addition of a series of flashbacks to December 1915, when a younger Miss Marple was engaged in a love affair with a married soldier. In both versions, the Vicar's role is reduced and he does not participate in the investigation since his presence as the narrator was unnecessary in a filmed version. A French adaptation, L'Affaire Prothero, was made as episode 14 of season 2 of the series Les Petits Murders d'Agatha Christie, first broadcast on September 9, 2016. There is no vicarage, and the setting is changed to an advertising agency in Lille. The investigators are the French policeman Commissaire Lawrence, his secretary Marlene, and reporter Alice Avril. Otherwise, the adaptation manages to remain faithful to the main premise of the original. The book was adapted for radio by Michael Bakewell, with June Whitfield as Miss Marple, Francis Matthews as the Reverend Leonard Clement, Imelda Staunton as Griselda Clement, and Francis Jeter as Anne Prothero. This adaptation was first broadcast by the BBC in 1993. The Murder at the Vicarage was released by HarperCollins as a graphic novel adaptation on May 20, 2008, adapted and illustrated by Norbert Morandier under the pseudonym Norma. This was translated from the edition first published in France by Emmanuel Proust Editions in 2005, under the title of L'Affaire Prothero.
Did you know?
The novel was first serialized in the U.S. in the Chicago Tribune, in 55 installments from August 18 to October 20, 1930.
Thank you for watching. See you again next time.